at the Collab webinar, and I'm very excited to speak to you about global collaboration for innovation success. I have a dual roles, so I'm a founder and executive director of Global Minds Network, which is an international advisory firm devoted to enabling leaders and teams to collaborate and innovate for global impact. I hold an academic role, so I'm practice director at the Center for Leadership and Effective Organizations, as well as a professor in global innovation leadership at Neoma Business School in France. So what I'll be sharing with you today is my work over the past decade around research around global innovation and multicultural collaboration, as well as a recent global study during the pandemic to link the two and see where we're going with collaboration and innovation around the world. So if we look at the world today as we see it, which has really been quite dynamic and turbulent over the past decade, but especially over this last year with the pandemic. And it's really been fascinating to see how we have been able to connect around the world. Because as we see it now, we are global, we're interdependent, we're connecting across cultures, across functions in a digital environment. And it's really looking at the future, the present and the future, to see how will we optimize this global network and how can we navigate a blended environment, not only be able to connect and collaborate digitally across the world, but also how can we optimize live on-site experiences to understand and to apply a more human-centric approach to employees and customers. So this is what I'll be sharing with you today, is really looking at the here and now, looking at the future of collaboration and innovation, and how can we optimize this to create more valuable solutions for people and the planet, for our organizations, for our communities, and across the world. And what I'm sharing with you is my research and work in consulting and advising and training over the past decade. In particular, I'll be sharing with you insights from my book, Leading Global Innovation. And the book shares with you three major global studies, and really in responding to the question, how to facilitate global innovation and multicultural collaboration. And these studies were conducted over 5 years with over 200 global project leaders at 45 multinational firms with HQ based in Europe, Asia, North America. And these project leaders were unique in a sense. They were high-level VPs, directors, senior managers responsible for new initiatives, new products, services, programs, responsible for innovation, as well as multicultural and digitally connected teams. So even 5 or 10 years ago when the study was conducted, I was focusing on organizations that were tech-driven. So they were primarily working for multinationals in ICT, technology industries, automotive, electronics, those who were already very connected and collaborating digitally as well as on-site. There was also a complementary study, so this was across 3 continents, 16 countries. There was a complementary study as well in Asia. So exploring and interviewing regional directors and managers and country managers to understand their perspective, the local perspective, and how do we connect the global network with local ecosystems. So I'll be sharing the insights with you through and also some insights from a recent global study that was just completed to see how this has changed, or has it remained the same during the pandemic. And what I'm excited to share with you is looking at organizational innovation needs today. And here there was a global study, the first phase with 122 global innovation leaders, C-level, VP level directors, and they were asked, what are the priorities now in 2020 and 2021 moving forward? And as you see, majority responded team and project collaboration, as well as strategic alignment. So collaboration is very much at the forefront, looking at how can we better collaborate with teams as well as through projects, and how do we align those initiatives across the world or across functions and cultures and units. And finally, and I apologize there, I see that it's not visible in the third area. The third area that you see in white is leadership development. And so those are the top three: team and project collaboration, strategic alignment, and leadership development. How can organizations ensure that leaders have the new competencies and skills in order to collaborate in a project and team-driven environment? And then that is followed by digital access, no surprise. Organizations are still trying to catch up in terms of digital platforms and tools. And that is then followed by a global innovation process and culture. And how do you nurture that? Through building a valuable global innovation culture and ensure you have the right process to make it happen. And finally, to empower leaders and teams through online training, on-site training, and various other tools. There were other mentions in terms of greater focus on local innovation, ecosystems, new project development, design thinking, and commercial transformation, execution excellence, and as always, revenue contribution. So if we look at these challenges, another global study, and that you'll see in the book too, remains the same. This has not changed in the last 5 years since the global study, as well as the discoveries in the book Leading Global Innovation. Trust building is still a major challenge in order to ensure effective collaboration, no surprise there. Team engagement, especially now in a digital environment, how to ensure teams are engaged, they're connected, they're engaged, they can actively contribute. Conflict management is another area to ensure that all voices are heard and that there is agreement, that there is an ability to facilitate collaboration in a productive way. Knowledge sharing has another big challenge. Again, are all voices heard, and how is the organization optimizing knowledge and talent around the world to ensure that new ideas are heard and valuable customer market information is shared. And then finally, risk-taking. This is another area from the recent global study, but also what I've seen in the past is that there's still a hesitancy to take risk in organizations to be able to facilitate and support new initiatives, especially in an environment now that requires more innovation. We look at those challenges, what is so important and what I've tried to emphasize, big motivation for writing the book on leading global innovation is the importance of collaboration, especially multicultural collaboration, to organizational performance and international market success. So through countless case studies and interviews with the leaders, it's very evident that a failure to place emphasis on collaboration or not having ineffective collaboration and not engaging local teams results in failures in concept design. So that often means that the right solutions or valuable solutions for those local markets are not implemented. And then strategic planning, that organization or leaders failing to integrate valuable knowledge from those markets through customers or through cultural practices or local needs, local market needs. Marketing, not having the message, the language, the means to effectively communicate to customers around the world. Operational efficiency also impacts in terms of the value chain and being able to align across the functions and cultures. And finally, customer connection and global sales performance. So and now more than ever today, it is important to speak the customer's language, to truly understand their needs and their interests, their preferences. And that takes effective collaboration, not only with local teams who understand the customers, but also with those customers to be able to effectively connect with them and build a strong relationship. And ultimately that affects global sales performance. So as you see, it's very important to ensure an effective collaboration process around the world. So what I introduced in the Global Innovation book, and which is even more relevant today, is what I call the multicultural approach, or multicultural collaboration approach. And I today call that the Global Innovation Readiness Framework, because it's a method based upon a rigorous research, based upon these hundreds of interviews with leaders, as well as on the ground research, to find out what are the optimal levers, what are the best practices, or what worked best for effective collaboration for global innovation projects. So that's what I'll talk about today. It's the framework that you find within the book, and it's based on the global innovation cycle. So as we see today, all organizations really conduct a continuous global innovation cycle. So we're in a project and team-driven environment. We're continuously moving from concept to our new initiative, new idea, to planning, to execution. And within there, we have to pay attention to the phases. So we have that creation, ideation phase, and then we move to we have the planning, strategic co-creation phase, then validation to ensure that concept speaks to those customers and markets, and we have a viable business case, and then ready to go to market, and how to prepare that, ensure that you have the marketing and sales teams and the resources to ensure great launch success, a big splash around the world. And that impacts performance. So how to ensure that all of these phases are aligned and that they can ensure organizational performance and market success. So there are three levers that I'll speak about today that drive that and that facilitate that collaboration in order to enable innovation performance. The first one is vision. So paying attention to leadership, an inclusive leadership that's able to effectively facilitate collaboration for new initiatives, and that is done primarily through strategic co-creation. So how you develop strategy in an engaging way, and so more of a strategic or sharing or co-creation. And then that leads to dialogue. So that helps you shape dialogue that empowers more knowledge sharing from teams around the world, and also enables cross-cultural learning. So they're learning from their colleagues, from their peers, learning what's important for customers and markets around the world. And that in turn shapes the space, a space where leaders can more easily develop a global innovation culture and a creative team climate. It's one where voices are heard, where they're inspired to initiate and create ideas, but also collaborate together to execute on those ideas. So I'm going to share with you today those three levers: vision, dialogue, and space, and as well as new insights from the recent global study. So if we look at vision, the importance of inclusive leadership and strategic co-creation, I'll share with you quickly the global leadership journey that all of us go through in terms of when we're going to launch a new project initiative. And we have to think about what are the leadership skills that are going to ensure success. If we go through these layers, I just want to mention them because it's important in terms of how a leader can influence that success, and our mental models and our values that we bring with the way we lead a project. And so if we look at the core of leadership values and models, we all develop our own leadership ethos. We have our particular models and beliefs that shape our core. And there are many out there, from trust-driven to servant-driven to many other models. And then if you look at the next layer, as we're leading projects around the world, we encounter cultural dimensions. So it's a very basic foundation, and these models have been around since the 1960s, from Hofstede's work, Trompenaars and Hall, and the Globe Study, Meyer, many others. And that basically helps us understand, okay, what are the cultural differences we need to be aware of? So as we encounter leadership and management of these teams around the world, so that creates an awareness, but it doesn't completely speak to how we can manage through a world now that's very dynamic and digitally connected. So then the next layer is really understanding cultural interaction. So global mindset, cultural intelligence. How do we respond to maybe cultural differences or different ways of communicating and collaborating? So that teaches us more of an agility as we respond and facilitate those teams. And then finally, that leads us to the importance of global innovation context. So what we're not seeing in previous models, especially in cross-cultural communication, is this context of global innovation. Well, then how are we responding or leading in an environment that is not only global, it's multicultural, and it's digitally connected? And so that's what I'm going to speak about today. What are those new leadership skills, and what's important to think about, what needs to be considered? And from that I mentioned, the Global Innovation Readiness Studies, we see that new mindsets for innovation leaders are emerging. As you see, overwhelmingly, a majority of the leaders or study participants agree that the perspectives need to be integrated. It's not just about having a digital mindset or a creative mindset. What is important today is to have a holistic mindset with a particular focus on a creative perspective, how you innovate through ideas and knowledge throughout the global network, a multicultural perspective in terms of how you as a leader are able to facilitate across culturally diverse teams and customers around the world, and a sustainable mindset, which is at the forefront today, and how to innovate across commercial, societal, and environmental outcomes. And finally, of course, digital perspective, and how does technology enable an innovation? So as you see, the majority felt that we need to have a more holistic mindset to integrate these perspectives, and then that was followed by a creative, multicultural mindset, sustainable, and then finally digital. And what you'll find in the book on leading global innovation, this supports the work in the book, in the sense that from the previous global studies, what was found to be most important is how innovation leaders develop these skills throughout the different phases. So how are you able to be more agile and respond to these phases as you're leading this global innovation project or new initiative? And what was found there in particular through the ideation creation phase, the empowering behaviors of leaders. How is a leader able to inspire the teams to initiate and come forward with new ideas, to share new ideas, and then enable them to co-create so that the optimal solution is developed or created? And that then leads to the planning phase, where leaders really are, need a more inclusive behaviors. It's very important today to stay close to the market and customer, and use a more of a strategic co-creation approach, where the leader can use more inclusive behaviors to integrate that knowledge, to understand what is important, and invite more knowledge sharing, so that an effective global strategy can be developed for the project. And yes.
Hi, Karina.
Hi, Joshua.
It's a little bit abstract for me still. These were case studies from 3 different cases. Were the companies actually, so they were multicultural teams, but they were also producing products that were used worldwide, or products that were just designed for certain areas, or?
Yeah, okay. So they were, the study here that helped shape the book were not based on case studies. They were based on over 200 individual leaders who shared a similar profile. So these leaders were either VPs, directors, or senior managers who were responsible for what I call a global innovation project. So a new initiative. It would be either launching a new product, launching a new service, or a new program. And so they all used a similar cycle. You know, we need to move this from concept to market, or planning to execution. And so that's where the commonalities were kind of studied to see, okay, what works best and what kind of behaviors are using as a leader to facilitate that process.
Okay.
Does that make more sense?
Yeah.
Mhm. And so it's really looking at the power of the crowd, in a sense, of these leaders to see what worked best and what
Okay.
were the greatest challenges too. What do we need to address? What do we need to watch out for? And so what was fascinating here is to look at how certain behaviors within that innovation cycle, as you're managing a new project, how that can either block or facilitate that process. And so, so you have to really, as a leader, think about, how do I initiate a project? How do I create opportunities to develop a new idea or solution with my team? In planning mode, how is the leader using opportunities to share knowledge and really tapping into the right knowledge to create a sound strategy? And then in the validation phase, how is the leader really trying to integrate and the right analytical process and a business case, so that you can ensure that business case really speaks to local market needs or international market needs. So that's where you need to go into concept, or ensure concept validation, ensure a process where the solution is really confirmed and tested within those markets, so that you can ensure more success for the launch. And finally, in execution mode, what was found there is that the most successful leaders use communicative behaviors. So the way they could facilitate knowledge sharing during the execution process, really staying close to the ground with the marketing and sales teams, ensuring that they could share critical needs, ensuring that they were trained and that they were sharing knowledge about customer needs. So really the leader had to pay attention to that and ensure continuous communication, knowledge sharing to ensure a successful launch. And yeah. So what I'm finding is the role of innovation leaders today are becoming more and more of a knowledge facilitator. So your success is really looking at how can you facilitate knowledge throughout that innovation cycle, and so that that will facilitate collaboration. And that again leads to the looking at sort of the process as we see it, from the global innovation process, from front end to new product development to go to market, just to emphasize the importance of planning. What was found here and what you see in the book too is looking at the front end, how leaders really need to pay attention to how much time they spend with their teams to ensure knowledge sharing and co-creation, especially in the planning phase. Because that's where you can tap into valuable market trends and customer needs, and looking at particular local practices and localization needs. It's so important to spend time here and engage the local teams who have that knowledge and who are connected to customers. It was often found that the leaders who failed here, or the projects that failed, were those who spent less time and ignored this aspect and only drove it from headquarters, or only drove it with particular leaders, sort of more of a push strategy. Often they were, failed to see what was important in those local markets and didn't create an optimal solution. So it's very important to execution success. And that's also where you build trust with teams, because you recognize their knowledge and how valuable it is for them to share and collaborate during this phase. And that was also found is that a number of organizations now are moving towards a local to global strategy. So in the past, it was more about global, let's push it out there, headquarters. There was a small number of executives in headquarters, strategists, the innovation executive and strategists who would put together the global strategy and then push it out to the different teams and markets around the world. And that had mixed results. As I mentioned earlier, often that might result in a failed solution, or not as effective of a solution. And so what many leaders and companies are doing now, they're moving towards the local, staying close to the ground. So let's start in the local markets or regions and share our solution, or share our ideas and co-create with them. so that we can see what's important for those markets, and then bring it back to global or to the headquarters and develop a strategy that truly speaks to international markets. So it's going local to global. So that brings us to dialogue. That you have the vision, you've developed the great vision and the strategy. You're ready to go in terms of developing this concept or solution. Then how can you enable collaboration throughout that process? And that's where I use the concept of inclusive dialogue. Leaders who were most successful were those who were very close to their teams and found ways, regular ways, whether it be weekly meetings, daily connections via messaging. They found various ways to really listen to the teams and create inclusive dialogue. And what I mean by that is the ability of a leader to listen, create moments through meetings or calls, pop-up calls, to truly listen to the team's needs. What's happening? Are they facing any challenges? Do they need any more resources or support? And then not only listening, but responding. So it's wonderful to be a great listener, and that's very important. But then what is equally important is how the leader responds to that. Did they really respond and provide more support resources, or did they respond to invite more ideas or discussion around an initiative? So this was found to be really important for team leaders to be successful on an innovation project. How you listen and respond, it's really how you create inclusive dialogue. And that develops more trust for effective team collaboration. This was again shown in the recent global study that was it's just being completed this month. Again, leaders said it's now more than ever in a virtual environment, it's so important to focus on relationship building. Develop relationships with your teams, with your stakeholders, internally, externally, and listening, really inviting them to conversation, listen to what's going on, what are their challenges, their needs, their interests, and then how you respond. How are you able to respond? That creates a lot more trust and confidence, and it shows both teams as well as stakeholders that you act on your promises. In a sense, you listen and you're able to deliver to them. And so that's powered by more open and consistent communication, how you're doing that online, how you're staying connected with everyone, and how it feeds into the project collaboration process. So not treating this innovation project as a separate process, but you need to integrate communication collaboration into that process. And I would like to mention knowledge sharing across cultures, because it's not mentioned a lot in literature. And I mentioned earlier cultural differences. We see a lot of the older models that talk about, well, this is how you're different in terms of time, how you approach time, and this is how you're different in terms of structure, or how, or relationships, or is culture more individual or more team-oriented or community-oriented. What I found most important is to study knowledge sharing across cultures today, because that's really what collaboration is about, and especially when you're trying to share knowledge and collaborate in a digital environment. So I found 5 areas that you may want to think about in terms of how you share knowledge with your teams across the world, and that's structure, power, openness, initiative, and response. So a structure really points to the communication context. So how is communication structured when you're sharing knowledge? When you're holding an online meeting, is it more informal, or are you able to create kind of a structure in terms of what you're sharing for the teams? So think about that, because that can impact cultural ways of communicating. And one tip that's very important is creating an agenda ahead of time, and a structure that teams can understand, so they can prepare and they can share knowledge, especially when English is a second language, or you're holding the meeting in a language that's not native to other team members. Power is another one to think about, how we use knowledge. This is a big one, because leaders, how a leader uh, controls knowledge, shares or does not choose to share, can impact team dynamics. And this is, I found, varies across cultures, that in certain cultures you find that the leader should have most of the knowledge and make most of the decisions, does not share that with the team. And that shows status. Whereas in other cultures, you may find that it's more enabling, that it is encouraged, it's important, that there's power in the team having knowledge. You find this I'd say North American culture, Northern Europe, I found that there was more emphasis to share with the team. The leaders would ensure more emphasis in sharing that with the team. And yet there were in some cultures where there seemed to be more emphasis on the leader having more knowledge and making those choices. I found that in some cultures in Asia, and in China and Japan, where there's a certain process. They do share within the team, but then the team leader is given more power to make the final choice or make his or her own recommendation. So we need to think closely about what is knowledge status, and how do you develop an environment that's safe for everyone to share, where team members also feel encouraged and they feel invited to share. And then there's openness to building on ideas, how that is encouraged around the world. How are you inviting your team members to take initiative and showing that it's acceptable, and creating that safe space again? And looking at what is important, how do we look at that around the world in terms of, for example, in North America or US in particular, building on ideas is really just seen as, well, it's a bit more aggressive. You can create conflict, that's fine. You should, challenge or confront other ideas to find the best. But in other cultures, this may be more uncomfortable. In Europe, it's in general, it depends on the country. You see this importance of debating and evaluating and exploring. Whereas I found in some of the countries in Asia, there was this sense of saving face, that you should not embarrass your colleagues by critiquing or calling out certain ideas. So we have to be aware of how we share knowledge, how we introduce ideas, and how we co-create. And then that leads to initiative. Again, how recognition and support for those ideas. How are you as a leader creating a safe environment, and also recognizing and inviting? Just because certain team members may not be initiating doesn't mean they don't have ideas. And maybe it's culturally inappropriate that you shouldn't be, shouldn't share an idea before you're invited. And so it's important for the leader to ensure every voice is heard. And then finally, response. How do you as a leader respond to those ideas and encourage them and provide feedback? And that's a process in itself, and how we provide feedback for teams, framing it in the way that it's positive, but it also shows constructive critique or guidance for moving forward. I'll share a quick story. One of my favorite, or what I see often in facilitating global teams, and I'm sure you have seen this too, the dynamics. We will see different dynamics for every team, because every team represents different cultures. And what is wonderful there, what I see often, and this is just a general example, often the teams, I'll have team members from North America, US, I'll have team members from across Europe, from across Asia, Middle East. The beauty of how we, across cultures, how we approach that innovation. And it's wonderful. You'll see, typically, I'll see my North American colleagues will be, sort of the ideating out loud, really rushing to the ideas and, pushing them out there and, trying to sort of spur and initiate, creativity. Whereas I'll see many of my European colleagues, and this again depends on the country, and I'm generalizing now, but I see tendency towards wanting to intellectualize a bit more and look at, well, let's explore this and let's examine this more, and let's instead of putting it out there too quickly, let's look at it and explore it, create. And then I'll have some of my colleagues, from Asia, maybe from Japan, South Korea, Vietnam, who will want to take more reflection, will need more time to take, to reflect on this and think about it and really nurture it. So what I find interesting here is that what is important is create an innovation process that works across cultures, where you create a space where everyone feels invited. And often I find that's important in how you develop that innovation process. So creating a process where teams can reflect, they're given time so everyone can share an idea, and then moving into a mode where everyone can also explore and discuss, and then finally to develop those ideas so that they're reflective of the team, and that there aren't just a few dominant voices that are heard, and there may be voices that are silenced. So for innovation, I think for creating inclusive innovation process, it's important to think about. All right, so that leads to knowledge sharing and learning. And we see that now in our digital and hybrid environment, the process, most importantly, of how we're connecting with the teams around the world, social networking. So how to optimize that digital platform and tools to connect with your teams. And then how are you using that opportunity to share knowledge, to facilitate knowledge sharing and collaboration, and in the process learning across cultures, and which is most valuable. So I'm just listed, this is from the book as well. So looking at what you need to think about as a team leader, how to be a knowledge facilitator, how to facilitate that process, that collaboration process. Are you using an effective platform that allows teams to effectively share that knowledge, and how are you using that throughout the project, interactive workflows? How are you inspiring more knowledge sharing and collaboration across the innovation project? And which tools are you using to make that happen? And even spontaneous sharing, which is always a wonderful way to inspire more ideas. So this is from the study, the most recent innovation readiness study this month. And here we see that, no surprise, the preferred collaboration platforms, video platforms, well, such as Zoom that we're using now, or WebEx, or Microsoft Teams, project platforms as well, such as Slack, and again, Microsoft Teams came up. So looking at, those were the two most popular, and closely followed by on-site and in-person. We look forward to that, getting back to this as well. It's interesting, 5 years ago, the study showed that on-site in-person was #1. So it's really because of the last 5 years and what's happened this year too, or this past year, its preferences are changing. That's followed by email and messaging, mobile apps, and the visual platforms like Miro, Mural. That kind of gives you a picture of how the organization is evolving and what leaders prefer. And finally, that brings us to a global innovation culture and a creative team climate. This is from the study, just to emphasize the importance of an innovation culture. Leaders were asked to rank or rate what is most important for you today, and in order to ensure a successful global innovation project. They ranked innovation culture #1, the majority, followed closely by team leadership, and then communication process and collaboration process were actually tied. So they saw that this is very closely linked, and that was followed by the project methodology, and then finally technology platform and tools. So if we take a look at the global innovation culture, what I found through previous research and through my work that you see in the Leading Global Innovation book as well, are these the values of what makes a successful global innovation culture. And there you find 3 values: cultural empathy, creativity, and collaboration. that were held by the companies and leaders who were most successful in leading global innovation projects. So if we look at cultural empathy, what that means is an organization that really places emphasis on teamwork. And we see that even more today. It's a team and project-driven environment. But not only teamwork, but they ensured culturally diverse teams. Do these teams really represent our customers around the world? And what kind of knowledge and talent do they bring? This was a great emphasis for these leaders. And that brings us to creativity, having the space and time to be creative, which prior to the pandemic and well, even in the past year, was difficult for organizations to set aside that time to ensure more focus on disruptive ideas or new ideas and time for innovative thinking. Organizations are moving towards this now, trying to look at ways how to create space and time in order to ensure more initiatives, more opportunities to create and innovate. And finally, collaboration, of course. Our topic, organizations are really trying to emphasize this more, the value of collaboration, especially through transparency. How to be transparent to our teams around the world, to share knowledge, ensure it's available via the platform, ensure learning, and that's particularly through knowledge sharing again. And that really helps shape a creative team climate that is more responsive, allows teams to be more responsive, to understand the needs and respond to them, to the market and customer needs. Again, more transparent, that they understand. There's an openness, they can trust in what is being shared. And respond to that, and it creates an entrepreneurial spirit. Teams feel more encouraged to initiate new ideas, to contribute to the project or to new opportunities, and that finally leads to execution success. So I will conclude the story by coming back to the multicultural collaboration framework, or what I call a global innovation readiness navigator. In just a few quick examples, you'll find multiple case examples or case studies in the book. And just to show you some examples on how are these organizations optimizing vision, dialogue, and space throughout the innovation cycle. Philips is a great example, and what they do in terms of inclusive leadership is they train all of their leaders on design thinking, a design thinking methodology, and then they encourage the leaders to use this for any new initiative. So they'll be encouraged to go out to the regions. Well, in pre-pandemic times, there would be a lot of travel, going out to the regions and using their design thinking methodology to create co-creation sessions for any new initiative. In that way, they could encourage more ideas and knowledge from the local markets and from their local teams. And then once they have the world tour, they could go back and synthesize all of this and in order to create a global solution, but with a local context that truly spoke to international customer needs. Airbnb has a fascinating way of sharing customer stories around the world. So they need to stay very close to the market and shifts and see how their customers are, what they prefer for lodging. And what they would do is have the virtual platform and sharing with their teams around the world. They would share local customer stories. And so that would inspire and drive their weekly meetings and share what was happening in Spain versus Canada versus Brazil versus Thailand. So they would have these customer stories that they would share, and that would inspire new ideas, new solutions. Yeah. And then you have Adobe, which has been very savvy in terms of using their own technology platforms and tools, which are already focused on collaboration. So they've been using this in a way to tap into their global talent pool around the world in order to create ideation sessions online for any new initiative. everything from marketing campaigns to new product launches. And then you have Essilor right here in Paris, where I'm based, and there are really have an innovate. It's a traditional company, of course, looking at healthcare or visual care solutions, as they say, optical solutions, and they stay very close to the ground and have really tried to encourage at the very early level to have these sessions, team collaboration sessions, to discuss what's important for the next offering, and to look at ideas that they can use when they launch new initiatives. So they've been encouraging this through internal efforts. And Lenovo, located in China, always has, in terms of global culture, global innovation culture in space, they've always encouraged their teams around the world to think globally. So any leader, any project leader around the world has the opportunity to launch a global project, and they really ensure that they stay connected to their other team members to understand local customer needs. Oh. And then we have Siemens as well, and that another case that will demonstrate how they were able to develop a knowledge platform and a learning platform that was powered by their teams around the world. So they created sort of quick YouTube clips or learning sessions and stories that they shared with their colleagues. And then finally, I think we have Wipro, which I've always been fascinated by. Their service an innovation partner. It's a large consulting firm or tech services firm that serves as an innovation partner to multinational companies around the world. And they have, for several years now, developed their own online collaboration tools. And one that I am particularly fascinated by is their 24-hour sort of incubator. And what they will do is have an online incubator. It's kind of like the 24-hour ideation session. And they'll invite their team members around the world to solve a wicked challenge. So they'll have one question, one problem, and they'll start in India, where they're based, in Asia, and they'll throw that question out there. They'll invite their teams to come in and ideate on this challenge, and they'll go around the world, basically. And within 24 hours, they usually have some very powerful solutions. And finally, we'll conclude Cisco. There's also an example in the book on Cisco and how they went from the global to a local, or local to global, as I explained earlier. So how they discovered that moving closer to local teams and starting with them to develop new initiatives worked a lot better than their older approach for really the push strategy, pushing those global solutions out to the market. So they have a success story in the book as well. So that concludes the journey and this that I wanted to share with you. I want to thank you for your attention, and I want to wish you a very happy new year and a great start for innovation success. And I'm open to questions, and you have a link there in terms of the book, as well as if you want to test your readiness, there's you can do that too, to see if you're ready to innovate this year.
Thank you very much, Karina, for this webinar. It's super insightful. I was taking a lot of notes. So now we have the questions. If you have questions, I can start with my question. Is because you were talking about knowledge sharing and trust and how to be a good leader, to create this kind of safe environment, like everyone is listened and we are in co-creation all the time. So how do you see the key factors to become this superpower leader, like this kind leader, or kind leadership, or relational leadership? So how, because as a few of the leaders, they are like this, but not all of them. unfortunately. So how do you see you can transform the leaders to become the leaders you want to have?
Yeah. What I find is important is inclusive leadership, and the emerging roles to be successful in this, in our changing environment is, and I emphasize again, global, multicultural, and digitally connected. The role of the leader is to serve more as a knowledge facilitator and an innovation orchestrator. Future skills of innovation leaders will really be to emphasize this ability to empower others, to show empathy, demonstrate empathy through listening and understanding, to empower, inspire the teams by encouraging and creating opportunities where they can share ideas and share knowledge, and where they're encouraged or motivated to engage in the innovation project. And the innovation leader at the same time not only needs to facilitate that knowledge, inspire and facilitate that knowledge, but also orchestrate, to keep an eye on orchestrating the innovation process so that that project will be a great success. So understanding how to integrate that knowledge into an effective strategy, and also the execution process, understanding how to facilitate communication, collaboration until you're ready for launch. So it's a dual role today, and that's where I see that innovation leaders need to be more agile. They need to be demonstrate more empathy, be more inclusive, so in that sense, the roles of knowledge facilitator and innovation orchestrator.
Thank you, Karina. Celia, Joshua, Bogdan.
Thank you, Karina.
Celia, you are mute. So, sorry, Joshua, you can follow.
Yeah. Hi, Joshua.
Hi. I think I remember seeing you at the EASPIM conference in the summertime, maybe the leadership SIG, I think maybe.
Yes.
Thank you very much. You've kind of covered my question. I come from working in agile organizational development, and so it's kind of you basically hit a lot of the parts of the question. I guess if it's international leadership and you're trying to hold multiple perspectives, you want to use your team and use your team and their multiple perspectives to gain innovation, or to understand the world in new ways. And how does that work if you have leaders in multicultural places where, like you said, maybe in Asia, the leader needs to make all the decision. Is that different if there's a leader that's in I don't know, a European or American background that comes into an Asian group, and they're waiting for him to make all the decisions, and he's trying to empower them to come out of their be empowered and to make their own decisions? Did that come out in conversations? Is that as a struggle, maybe?
Yeah, very interesting question, because and there are numerous stories shared, which I didn't mention. So these leaders shared stories, which are also in the book, and one that reminds me of your question. A leader who is responsible for developing new initiatives in Asia, especially China, and found that when this leader first started, the norm for these teams in China was that, well, we leave that to the leader. You're supposed to come up with ideas. So when he was trying to encourage the team and say, okay, now let's, come up with ideas, we're gonna do an ideation session. They're like, well, no, that's your idea. You're the leader. You should be coming up with the ideas. And so, but this leader went about it in as he mentioned in his story, was that, well, what was important is then, okay, let's invite them to have a more collaborative process. So he introduced his approach, which was more about listening to everyone's ideas, and he had some ideation sessions and creative exercises. And actually through that process, the team started appreciating, those local team members started appreciating that their voices were heard and that they could share ideas. But what was important was to create an environment where they felt safe, that this was okay to, within their local company or their local, and also speak to the local leaders for them to either be a part of that process so they could also share it and show openness, or to work with the teams, the expat leader or the international leader worked with the teams. But it was important to invite the local leaders as well. And I've also found this, I'd like to add, because I deliver leadership sessions in Asia too, or innovation leadership in China and Vietnam especially. But what I've found is by taking them through a process, that innovation and collaboration process, it's often appreciated. If you facilitate it in such a way that they can share their ideas and the local connections, what they feel from a local perspective, it's really appreciated and they enjoy that. And I feel that as an international leader, you learn in the process too. You learn what's important for them and what is important for the solution. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you.
Celia, you had a question. You have to unmute the microphone.
No, I want to say thank you for your book because I read it. I'm not finished. I think it's very important. It was the process, yes. But yes, I think you are right. All you say is really for me clear in my brain. But also in Europe, now we are talking about Spain. Also, the system is very old-fashioned, I tell you, because they try to improve, the system, the new global thinking. But at the end, the leader is like the boss. What he says is less communication. It's more apparently, on the outside, but inside is not the point. And I think it's very important that people understand what it means. And I think how you show and the representation, you can give them the sense what is about leading, in the group and global. I think it's very important. Yeah.
Thank you, Celia, and for your message of support. And I completely agree. And I think will be important for our current and future generation leaders to pay attention to this and to become more inclusive and to look at how they can improve their leadership skills and engaging others to be more, and inspiring new ideas and opportunities. And that will result in greater innovation performance.
Yes, I'm agree, totally agree. Thank you.
That's why I think, the Celia point and Joshua, it was very important as well. I think it's like how you create this kind of leaders. And if in Asia you have to have external agents to be able to facilitate the process, become that way, or the other people as well understand this type of leader. Like this was a very good, important point from Joshua. Like maybe the others, they don't understand that this kind of leadership is possible.
Yeah, and you can create an inclusive process as long as you're respectful of the cultural norms too. It's not about, okay, I'm going to bring in this open, American process or open, French process it's creating a process that works for all, but also respects that local culture. And then I think you'll find that it's learning, everyone will be open to sharing, and it's a learning process not only for the teams but for the leader, because you're learning new insights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Bogdan, do you have questions? Celia, sorry.
No, I was just thinking about how to understand the people who are from the team, because as many are local, but with differences between knowledge and expertise, and most of them, they have an entrepreneurial spirit, and they want to to push their ideas in the front. And sometimes we have to understand how to lead the project, to not pivoting from the or to a project to a result to another result. So this is for the from the small companies and innovations because see sometimes in innovation companies are experts are not they are not trying to lead a group of people. They are trying to expose an ideas, and there are so much differences between the ideas. So how to knowledge the team about directions and of a project of
Yeah.
I don't know how to say, but
No, I understand. Yeah, and I think that, and I'll draw from my consulting experience, but also from the insights of leaders, because as you mentioned, you may already have an initiative, and it's not one that will demands a co-creation for the solution. However, what is important is that you have engagement and support from those teams and stakeholders. And there, it may not be, you can view it as a co-creation of the actual process and collaboration. So you can present the solution to your stakeholders and local teams, and then ask for any additional feedback. Because it's important to invite their engagement, and they want to feel their voices are heard in order to support this initiative or solution. So this is where it's important to have a feedback process and invite them to give feedback on certain aspects of that solution so that they feel they have a stake in it, and they feel that you respect their role and their contribution to this project. And this works much better. That way they feel that the solution isn't just pushed on them. Here, there's a solution, this is, what we want you to do to execute on it. What is important is to invite their feedback as well. Here's the solution. Do you feel there are any areas of improvement, or where do you see your role? Would you like to support this? To invite engagement, and this works. I feel this helps strengthen their commitment and support of your initiative.
I was wondering, the way that you talked about collaboration, and I'm guessing it sounded like these are large companies. I had the feeling that the collaboration meant within the company collaboration.
Yeah.
Is this also leadership is being like able to, okay, we need other resources than what we have, so we are going to look for other companies, or I don't know, even if it's other parts of the company to collaborate with, or was it mostly within the company?
Yeah, good point, Joshua. It was internal collaboration primarily, looking at, for any new initiative, how do you engage the stakeholders within the company, but also teams, functional teams, cross-functional teams, and then local teams geographically. But that also was strongly connected to customers as well, because in engaging local teams, that also influenced how you could collaborate with the local customers.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So I do touch upon that in the book, how those two are very closely linked,
Mm-hmm.
in developing a collaborative network. For your internal teams, that really impacts how you're able to create strong collaboration externally with your customers, suppliers, and other partners.
Okay.
Yeah. I was thinking, Karina, as well, from your frameworks, and you were mentioning tools as well. Like maybe we have to discuss how to identify how to use the Collabwith platform for this collaborative process, and how to help the leaders, how the platform can help the leaders to become, with this process and the tool, how to help them to become more the inclusive leaders the innovation needs for global collaboration.
this is going to become so important now, especially in a digital world, you know, to how to facilitate that process online. And there's a lot of exploration going on, but it will be important. I think the that's where I feel the Collabwith platform will become so essential to make those connections, you know, help organizations, or whether in academia or industry, and make the connections and facilitate that collaboration.
Thank you. Do you have something more to add to the webinar, Karina?
Just that it was a great pleasure to share insights from the Leading Global Innovation book, the global study, and I really enjoyed our conversation, and I really appreciate your questions. It's always inspiring, and I really wish you a lot of innovation success this year.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yada, for the opportunity.
Happy New Year. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Yada.